Okay, you guys, this episode of Paradigm Profiles is part 2 of Misery and Mayhem, Mongols vs. Mayhem. But the Mongols were at a serious disadvantage almost from the beginning. They were sitting ducks and easy to identify. The fact that they were on motorcycles was easy enough to spot. But if that wasn't enough, their cuts made it that much easier. It put a target right on their backs. For them, they were fighting an adversary they couldn't see or identify. Not at first sight anyway. Unless their opposition initiated an act of aggression first, there was just no way to tell who was who. It frustrated them, almost to the point to where they didn't want to wear their cuts in public areas. However, for a motorcycle club, the Mongols surprisingly held their own, especially when going up against an organization as powerful as the Mayhem. There were Sureños all over Southern California who were more than willing to put in work for the Mayhem. But in the end, the Mongols were rocked to their core. Being outnumbered and going up against an enemy you can't see is overwhelming. The Mayhem and their Sureño following were just too much for them. They never surrendered or threw in the towel, but the Mayhem kept up the pressure. In March of 2004, Mexican Mafia leadership held meetings with the local Sureño gangs and sent word to the Mongols that they felt disrespected and that the Sureños had sustained over $20,000 damage in loss of drug revenue and personal damages. The Mafia said that they would consider the Mongols as nothing more than just another LA street gang. This $20,000 was to compensate for all the busted drug deals and basically for the wasted time they spent beating them up. This was like adding salt to a wound that was already festering. In April 2004, they responded by telling the Mayhem that the war was on and that they weren't going to pay them shit. There was no way the Mongols were going to comply with a demand like this, and they never even considered it. Being on the losing end of a physical conflict was one thing. They could recuperate and bounce back, but to submit and comply with something like this would have tarnished their image forever. This would have been the equivalent to paying rent or getting bitched in prison, and there would be no cleaning this up. The Mexican Mafia warned that if the Mongols didn't pay, they would be put on the green light list and its members would be targeted for murder by the Sureños in and out of custody. The Mafia is said to have made another request to the Mongols at the time: kill Doc, a former Mongol president, and all will be forgiven. The former Mongol president, Ruben Doc Cavazos, was already unpopular with the Mongols because Doc was largely responsible for the recruitment of a majority of the Sureño gang members into the Mongols. Doc was the one who opened the door and started recruiting Sureños straight from the hood. Doc is originally from Chicago, where he was born, but him and his family moved to Highland Park, California when he was young. When Doc was around 11 or 12, he joined the Avenues gang, a gang that's always been heavily affiliated with the Mexican Mafia. So at one point, he actually even identified himself as being a Sureño. But he never really got deep into gangbanging, and after he did a short stint in the county jail, he took up an interest in MCs. At first, he didn't identify with any particular club. He was just intrigued by the MCs and their image. He had heard about the Hells Angels and other clubs, but the Mongols was a club he knew had strong ties to Southern California. Although the Hells Angels had most, if not all, of California in its grasp, Doc decided to join the Mongol nation and quickly became well known in the organization. He was good at recruiting new members, and he just had a special gift when it came to influencing others. But he was power hungry, and he knew he could assert more control over these Sureños if he brought them in. A lot of the Mongols that had been prospected in were already Hispanic, and a lot of them had roots in Southern California. Doc seen the potential in prospecting in Sureños because there was a huge pool of them that they could tap into through a lot of the Mongols that were already in the club. Some had brothers, cousins, or close friends that they had known and who were more than willing to join the club like the Mongols. Because there were already a lot of Mongols from Southern California, the Mongols had a certain mystique and a low-riding type of vibe about them that made it easy for Sureños to gravitate towards. This made the transition a smooth one. However, Doc was just thinking about bolstering the numbers. And like a lot of the Mongol investments, ventures, or club endeavors that the club pursued, foresight was never one of his strong suits. He didn't see the complexities or the ramifications of bringing in street-level Sureños or how the Mexican Mafia would use this leverage later. At some point, it became evident to a lot of the Mongols that the majority of the guys he was prospecting in came from his own neighborhood. Most were guys who were willing to step away from their affiliations as Sureños to join the Mongol nation. They were different than the normal recruits others brought in. They had less allegiance to their previous gang and loved to fight. A lot of the members participated in bombings, shootings, and were also military trained. But just like the Hells Angels, when you become an organization that's believed to be involved in organized crime, the feds start taking a closer look at your activities. And the federal government took notice. Eventually, undercover agents were sent in to infiltrate and gather information. One such recruit was Billy Queen, who had went undercover in 1998. He stayed there as a patch-wearing member for 3 years. He became the secretary of the gang and began to handle all of their books. He also knew where the skeletons were buried. This helped when the federal government came to arrest the group in May of 2000 with approximately 700 federal agents in an action that crossed 4 states. All in all, when the day was done, 54 Mongols ended up in prison for various criminal activities. They hit the Mongols hard. Doc, however, rose to power quickly in the motorcycle gang. But he was power hungry and wanted it all. He didn't mind a little violence, nor did he mind getting into fights with the Hells Angels. In fact, he encouraged it and had aspirations to destroy the HAs. Over time, he became known as the Mongol warlord to some and Doc Cavazos to others. But as time went on, the feud between the Mongols and the Hells Angels began to erupt more and more into violence. One incident occurred on April 2nd, 2002 at an event called the Laughlin River Run in Laughlin, Nevada. I covered this in a previous profile about the Mongols and the Hells Angels. Bikers from all over the country all gathered to represent their club at the Nevada playgrounds. But on this day, police found a dead body lying slightly away from a downed Harley. A young biker was shot in the back, a Hells Angel named Christian Tate, along the Interstate 40 in Nevada. At the same time, the Hells Angels and the Mongols were in the midst of a beef with each other, and the Laughlin River Run was ground zero for the fight. At the beginning of the event, the then president, Roger Penny, attempted to arrange peace with the Hells Angels so that both motorcycle clubs could enjoy the festival. But this was a short-lived respite. Another Hells Angel had a different idea. Ray Folks came into the event looking to fight, and he was out for blood. He walked in and kicked a Mongol member in the chest, which started the brawl. It was a free-for-all. At the end of the fight, there was 3 dead bodies and 13 others were hospitalized. But one of those who was injured was then President Roger Penny. This incident is one of the defining incidents that made Doc unpopular with a lot of the Mongols, because Penny was one of the ones who was gravely hurt that day, and it never should have happened. What didn't sit right with a lot of the Mongols is how Doc managed to go virtually unscathed while Penny got hurt. He was Penny's right-hand man, and it was his responsibility to protect him. However, Doc was seen running after Penny was down and injured. And for this reason, Doc was being looked at as a coward. Penny almost didn't survive. His injuries were nearly fatal. But he got lucky and was taken to the hospital just in time. Meanwhile, Doc still had a hand to play. When Penny went down, Doc seen his chance to seize power and fill the void. Prior to the April event in October of 2000, another major fight had broken out between the 2 clubs. It was at the Orange County Fair in Costa Mesa. Once again, a melee kicked off. This, however, didn't stop Doc from attempting to make the Mongols one of the most feared and largest motorcycle gangs in the state of California. In 2005, several federal agencies, including ATF, again, joined forces to infiltrate the Mongol nation. Their objective at that time was to wipe out the Mongols' leadership. The club was now known for murder, theft, as well as racketeering and other RICO violations. And at the helm of the group supervising it all was none other than Ruben Doc Cavazos. Several of the agents became patch-wearing members, at least 7. No one knew how that occurred, but Doc played a big role in how they managed to do it. Doc was intoxicated with power and he couldn't get enough. But the 7 agents who infiltrated the club recognized this and used their resources to help him. That's all it took for him to win their favor, to help him garner this power. When they were confident they had everything they needed to indict this ham sandwich, never mind, it's an old expression, 200 ATF agents launched a raid that netted more than 50 members. The action crossed 6 states and it produced a litany of charges. What followed was the arrest of Ruben Doc Cavazos and other members of the motorcycle gang that resulted in an 86-count indictment brought down against them. Included with the indictment was a request to take both the name and the logo from the Mongol nation. In the end, Doc and several others pleaded guilty to charges and received sentencing. While this was going on, he was voted out of the Mongols on August 30th, 2008 in Vernon, California. The Mongols learned a lot from Doc's tenure as the president of the Mongols, and they used it to tie up a lot of their loose ends. But despite the fact that Doc had lost a lot of favor and respect with the Mongol nation, the Mongols still refused to concede to the Mexican Mafia's request to kill him. They had no intention on paying the $20,000 for the MA's claims of lost revenue and lost equipment either. For a brief time, both of these organizations found themselves at a critical impasse with neither one willing to budge. The MA felt disrespected and wanted to be compensated, and the Mongols' future and existence as a respectable MC hung in the balance. But the Mongols refused to consider this and looked at it as nothing more than a feeble bully tactic. They simply had no intention on conceding to any of the MA's threats. In fact, the Mongols in turn made a few threats of their own. A biker inconspicuously stopped next to a Mexican Mafia member while he was driving his car. The MA member was waiting at a traffic light with members of his family as passengers. The Mongol leaned over and said to the driver through the passenger window, "See how easy it would be to hurt you or your family?" He then sped away. The Mongols had successfully facilitated their message, but this just caused the MA to ramp up the pressure even more. Undeterred by their resistance, the Mexican Mafia in turn greenlit the entire motorcycle club and specifically put out a hit on a Mongol tattoo shop in La Mirada. The Mexican Mafia knew that this particular tattoo shop was one of the Mongols' favorite hangouts and that there were always Mongols working there or just hanging out. Not only that, but they knew that this was a vulnerable location to hit them at and that it could be done with relative ease. On April 26, 2004, a Mexican Mafia associate and gang member from Rivera 13 named Luis Mono Jaramillo pulled up to the Body Illusions tattoo parlor in Whittier. He rode up on his Rice Rocket, a Japanese-style motorcycle, and parked his bike in the shop's parking lot just minutes before the shop was scheduled to close. Mono entered the tattoo parlor still wearing his helmet and began shooting randomly at both customers and employees. The owner of the shop, Mike Magic Esparza, was killed, and another individual, the only active Mongol that was present that day, Andrew Babadia, was grazed with bullets in the neck and chin. Brian Prospect, a former Mongol, along with two other guys, Thabo and Spider, managed to escape out the back door without incident. The Mexican Mafia's message was still effective, but the primary objective to kill Mongol MC members was an epic fail. As news of the La Mirada hit spread, hundreds of Mongols began to fear for their lives. Scared that they could be the victim of the next Sureño attack, a number of them even turned in their cuts and renounced their Mongol membership. Mono, the Rivera 13 gang member selected to do this hit, ended up cooperating and implicating two other MA associates, Benny Acosta and Ernie Howard, who he says threatened to smoke him if he didn't follow through with this assignment. Mono was actually at one time a well-respected Rivera 13 gang member who was a skilled Rice Rocket bike rider. This was one of the main reasons why he was selected for the hit. In fact, this incident was often referred to as the MA Rice Rocket Hitman. But soon after the hit was carried out, the MA had deep-seated concerns about whether or not Mono was capable of holding his mud, and their concerns ended up being on point. Almost a year after the owner, Magic, was shot and killed, Mono sat down and confessed his role in the shooting to detectives. He implicated Acosta and Howard, claiming that they provided him with a helmet, a stolen Rice Rocket, and a backpack containing 3 handguns. He also claimed that they threatened to smoke him if he didn't follow through with it. While Mono was still housed in the LA County Jail, the MA attempted to have him killed in an effort to silence him. The Sureños actually staged a full-fledged riot as a diversionary tactic while they attempted to kill him. But Mono was lucky to have gotten away with only a severe beating. Several sheriff's deputies intervened and stopped the Sureño hit squad from killing him. The green light was on the Mongols, and every Sureño in Southern California was under strict orders to kill them on sight. Meanwhile, a reputable Los Angeles Fox News 11 reporter by the name of Chris Blatchford was covering this story. On the segment he ran, he featured an unidentified Mongol shot caller that he interviewed. The Mongol couldn't be identified because Blatchford used a black silhouette to protect his identity. The Mongol was saying all the right things, and it sounded like the conflict could possibly be averted if the right minds came together. Soon after the interview was aired, the station was contacted by a Mexican Mafia representative who asked Blatchford to arrange a meeting between the two parties. This meeting was eventually made, and thus a full-scale war was in fact averted. Who knows how this conflict would have played out if the people who got involved wouldn't have ever put their best foot forward. They obviously understood the gravity and the potential that this could have involved. Sometimes diplomacy is the best course of action, especially when you're dealing with these types of powerful organizations who have the ability to spill blood on a serious level. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. As always, we appreciate all the support, the positive comments, and all the positive feedback. For those of you who have been following our updates, we have a few new series that we're going to be dropping over the course of the next few weeks, so be looking for those to drop sometime soon. We're also going to be doing a Q&A, so get your questions in. On a closing note, as we always say, we appreciate you guys, our viewers, as we know that without you, we would cease to exist.